There's a legend in these parts about Bigfoot. As he was wandering through the forest, he thought about having a podcast. And he walked and thought and walked and thought. Then he came across a little bunny and he pondered, I wonder if that bunny would be my co-host. And the rest, it was history.
This is Off the Cuff, and I'll be your host for this show and for other shows, hopefully. Maybe we can do this once in a while. So on this show, I'll voice my opinion. We'll talk about some ghosts, some mythical creatures, cryptozoology. We'll talk about a little bit about everything. A little bit about everything. That's okay. I mean, there's nothing sacrosanct here. We'll talk about everything.
So whether you're psychic, whether you're downloading information through technical remote viewing, whether you're having a dream about something, it is information. It's energy, basically, information, and it is translated into the information.
Okay. Now,
time doesn't matter, right? So I think once you get out of like the three dimensions, you start getting to the time dimensions, get into these things. How does that tachyon field relate to time?
Right. There is no time. There's never been any time. Einstein, he was lazy. He was a lazy kid. He was a lazy ass child. Okay. Loreto, Peru, which is in Alto Nani, which is a district of Lima. Okay. There is a small village there, which you pointed out on the map. And that they was buzzed by a white orbic UFO about 3 days ago. And they buzzed that city. And then it landed over into the jungle. Now, let me just back up. Every 10 years or so, this will happen. One time it was in Colombia, another time it was in Brazil. And they actually made a movie about it called The Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was sci-fi, but it was actually based on real events. And this is one of those real events. Now, you're
right on. Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
We're Bigfoot and the Bunny. I'm Chris Carr.
And I am Kristen Johnson.
And we're really happy to be here. And it's great to see you guys. Hello, Anne-Marie Young, Bob Brunell. Hello, Johnny Topside. Hello, Brandon. What's up, brother? What's happening? It's good to see you guys. And of course, we lost our friend Michael Lynch, and you guys already know the stuff. But tonight we have a very good friend of Michael's who is working on some of his work up until the day he passed. So we're going to bring her on in just a second, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about all kinds of things. We're going to get down. We're going to get deep. We're going to get dirty. This is going to be fun. So thank you for joining us on a Saturday evening. Welcome to summer. It's Memorial Day weekend.
Thank God. Yes.
Fuck yeah. We're pretty happy about that.
Yeah, we are.
The sun is shining here in Rhode Island. It was. It's dark now. And I just heard a bunch of fireworks. I don't know if I even told you that. I was outside. It was so many fireworks. It was ridiculous. I was like,
everybody celebrated.
I thought Godzilla was coming. It was ridiculous.
The last time that happened, we thought Cthulhu was with them. So.
Yeah, totally a Cthulhu thing, which is local to our area. Mm-hmm. If you're into the Lovecraft,
Yeah.
So, yeah. Brandon says he's dirty. He's down and dirty.
Nah, that's where you get the Bigfoot and the booby.
And the booby. But why just one?
Because I was only on one side.
Bet you can't eat just one.
But then I went on the other side. You had to be there to know what we're discussing. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, and they usually show up in pairs, but one is okay too. We're cool with whatever happens to be around at the time. Whatever floats your boat. Makes your world happen.
Just one.
We are all good with that. One thing I need to do Let's bring up a bio for our guest, who is Dr. Renae Nagle, which you guys know, who was on here with the aforementioned Dr. Michael Lynch not too long ago. I think it was last year. They were both on, and what a great show that was. She's a good friend to him, and we're going to discuss his work and recent discoveries. Renae Nagle comes to us with a background in spiritual coaching and metaphysics, a clinical but down-to-earth psychotherapist, a hypnotherapist, a veteran, and many years of practice utilizing physics to understand energy and how it can transmute trauma. But more importantly, her understanding of trauma, both personally and professionally, goes hand in hand with the treatment of abductees' PTSD experiences. Renae is a 2-time self-published author who shares stories about the desensitization. Yeah, good job, Chris.
Desensitization.
Sensitive, yeah, of
Moving
trauma.
on.
I'm just going to let it go. Can alleviate the depression and anxiety and flashbacks that are precipitated by the experiences of trauma. In her second book, she co-authored with Dr. Michael Lynch, her dearest friend and colleague. They share their collective love of paranormal subjects, including the psychological ramifications of trauma and how energy transformations can change that trauma. Renae comes to us with her own personal story dealing with her own experiences in galactic interventions. So, without further ado, let's bring on Dr. Renae Nagle. Hello, dear.
Welcome back.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for
It's
being
been
here.
a really interesting day, people.
Yes,
It
it has.
sounds like it.
The powers that be did not want me to come on the show once again this evening.
What was going on, dude? I read your messages, but
There
our
was
audience
so much.
doesn't know. Maybe just
Yes, please.
Well,
Highlight
everything
of-
from my internet in the last 24 hours, T-Mobile telling me, well, they're doing upgrades and you'll be back in service in 24 hours. I said, well, by then it's too late. I'm doing a podcast. So my landlord was gracious enough to let me siphon off his internet services.
I'm glad you do that.
That was
Yeah,
kind of him.
Yes.
Well,
That's
you can take the girl out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the girl. So I always have to find solutions because my whole life is about having a tower movement, double Scorpio, sun and moon, Aquarius rising. So, it's a whole life of dealing with solving problems and dealing with trauma. I guess that's why it's my specialty. Anyway.
So it can be, and you've had some trauma, and maybe we'll wind things back and start with your childhood and like how you got involved in all this stuff and where that trauma.
God, long story. Well, I guess it probably started at the age of 2. I was left alone a lot. My parents worked and they were out of the house, and I was constantly, just figuring out how to take care of myself. And I had many years of not remembering anything in my childhood. I would say probably from the age of 2 to maybe 8 or 9. I know I was in a body, but I don't remember anything. And oftentimes when I've dealt with speaking with abductees or experiencers, or whatever you'd like to call them, they have these moments where they're in a body on the planet on this earth, but they don't recall having a life or having memories. And I had a psychotherapist who was a Vietnam era veteran like myself once say to me, well, maybe you've had sexual abuse trauma. No, because I do regression hypnosis. I've had it done on myself. I've done it with hundreds of clients of my own. And no, there's been none of that. And then as I progressed into my teen years, I would just have these out-of-body experiences. Be able to fly and come back into my body, things like that were out of the ordinary. That who would I discuss those with, since nobody in my family ever talked to me about these things. But then as I got older, I found out that I did have Native American heritage on my paternal grandfather's side of the family, and that some of those ancestors did have psychic abilities. And as I progressed throughout my childhood and teen years and young adult life, I had a lot of psychic and mediumship abilities that would just come flooding back into me. I would just know things. I would hear things. I was clairaudient, clairsentient. I would hear things, know things just about people. And I didn't understand it because there was nobody to discuss it with. And of course, growing up in a family where my father went through triple bypass heart surgery with the world famous Dr. DeBakey. He died on the operating table 12 times. And when he came back, he shared with me all his near-death experiences, and I was 12. Wow. And so that was and that was my first exposure. Can you imagine, being the oldest daughter of 6 kids? It was like the Brady Bunch, 3 boys, 3 girls. And, I had a lot of responsibility as a child. I really didn't have a childhood. I was really what you would call the parentified child. I had a lot of responsibilities at a very young age. So that when I finally enlisted in the Army in 1975, after I graduated from high school, I was made a squad leader, platoon leader right away. I was shipped overseas. I worked in Army hospitals, stateside and in Europe, and I worked trauma. I was an EMT. So I was that person, the medic that you called that went on ambulance runs. If you needed to have any type of emergency medical procedures, that was me. And I was 18. Okay.
Wow. Let me just say one thing.
18.
When we were young, it was not like information was so readily available. We couldn't go to Dr. Google.
No.
What is this near-death experience thing? Even the phrase near-death experience didn't really exist in our.
I never even heard of it until many years later. Many years later.
Yeah, you would have to go to libraries. You'd have to research stuff by reading books. Reading the books and that kind of stuff. And it just wasn't as accessible even in those books.
No,
it is today. By any stretch of
not at all.
So
but can you imagine? I was already seasoned by the time I went into the military to be leadership position, to be responsible. I just dealt with trauma. Anything could be thrown at me and I never panicked. I worked in an emergency room. I did rotations in that Army hospital in Nuremberg where Hitler gave his speeches, by the way. And talk about negative energy there. Oh, yes. But I loved it because I was young, 18 to 22, 75 to 79. So I'm technically a Vietnam era veteran because I felt into that category, but I'm non-combat. So the blessing was that even though I was exposed to trauma, I wasn't necessarily traumatized. So that later on, when I became a clinical psychotherapist, I was able to kind of separate myself out, like Dr. John Mack did when he was working with his patients doing his alien abduction clinical assessments. So I was able to be like a third-party observer. So I wouldn't be triggered because when you are traumatized, you have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So you can be triggered if you have unresolved trauma that hasn't been desensitized. Okay. I know that's a big word for some people to say, and I even trip over it myself, but you did just fine.
Sensitized, desensitized. It's a very simple word, but I gaffed it anyways, and that's a live show. It happens.
Yeah, and you did just fine. So when I was in the service, I worked 8-9 hour shifts, 12-hour shifts, maybe 8-9 days in a row. I was it. And I was lucky because I had Army surgeons, warrant officers that taught me things. They taught me how to suture. They taught me how to start IVs. I was 18 when I was doing this stuff. Okay. Who does that? Right. And I mean, had I been sent to Vietnam, I would have been prepared, because I had the best warrant officers training. And these guys, they were in the field. They were in combat. They were in military. They didn't take a lot of shit from anybody. They said, look, here's the problem. Here's what we need to do. We can't react to it. We just have to get in there and fix the problem. And so because I was raised that way in my family, I just deal with problems. If something would come up to me, I don't panic. I just handle it because I'm it. You're the only person there. So, you have to be a very strong individual and you can't think about a lot of these things, until much later on when they come back to slap you in the face at some point. But then after that, I really felt like I got more and more into physics and holistic medicine. So then I went and got a bachelor's in science. I have a bachelor's in environmental health and community health, which really helped me in the long run because it helped teach me about the ecological perspective of the earth herself. I learned a lot about physics and biology and immunology with my bachelor's in science. And that was really instrumental in taking me to the next level of getting my master's in clinical social work. So, and at that point, as I evolved through treating clients, I learned, you know what, I need to work smarter, not harder. So I was very close to being in an accident on a back icy country road in DeKalb, Illinois, where I was living. And I was going to a community mental health agency for a job one day. Well, the roads were very icy. And I had this huge tractor trailer coming sideways at me, and it was going to hit me head on. And I would have been killed in that moment. But my guide said to me, pull over now. And as I pulled over and I looked up, I saw the truck driver looking down at me with panic on his face. And I was so pissed because I thought, is this the way I go out? I have too many things to accomplish, right? And I was so angry. By the time I got to my work, I was in full-blown PTSD. So bad, I was just triggering all over the place. And luckily, I had a colleague, Penny Shavit, little tiny redheaded Jewish clinician. She's like, come here, Renae. So she calls me into her room and she goes, I just finished my EMDR certification courses. She goes, you've got post-traumatic stress disorder. Here, let me try this procedure with you. And guess what it was? It was EMDR, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. And of course, my first book, I did write about it, but it's over 308 pages. But it also has all my stories in it from my, evolution till I got to this point. But the second book, it's only 126 pages, and it's very succinct. And this is what Dr. Michael Lynch helped co-write with me regarding how energy actually works with tachyon energy fields to desensitize and transmute trauma with using physics. But I'll get to that in a minute. So
he's doing EMDR. And I just did want to ask you to interject one little quick thing. What were some of the symptoms? So you had this terrible accident. Well, it wasn't an accident, but almost, and it's very, very scary.
Well, you're in a high level of heightened anxiety.
Sure.
You're having repeated thoughts of the traumatic issue. I didn't want to get back into my vehicle and drive because, I was having pre-anticipatory anxiety about possibly being in another accident, driving home on ice and snow, and of course, then I was really, really angry because I thought, oh my God, is this how I die? And I felt cheated. Right. So then you have that issue on top of it. And my supervisor at that job she was no help. She's like, oh, you'll get over it. As she's sitting there smoking her cigarette in her office. I'm like, are you fucking kidding?
Back in our day.
And
here she is puffing on her cigarette, and she probably was in that job for 35 years. And, what did she know about trauma? Okay. So as a result of that, Penny actually did one 90-minute session of EMDR therapy with me, and the triggers were gone. And I was a believer. So for the next year, I went through both certifications, and you literally have to treat hundreds of clients, okay, before they let you go to, part 2 to get the certification. So it's not like I wasn't in the trenches treating people. And by the way, not only was I treating pedophiles, okay, but I was treating children who were sexually molested by the pedophiles. Okay.
All right. Can you tell us a little bit what EMDR is? What's involved with that? The EMDR. What does it mean, and what is it? A little bit, just what's entailed.
Okay. So basically, it's very easy to understand. When you go into regular therapy, they do what's called cognitive behavioral, which is talk therapy. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with talk therapy is that when the sound comes out of the mouth, it goes into the tympanic membranes. It vibrates the bones, stapes, oxalar, functioning fluids in there. And then that wave form stamps your energy field here where your seat of emotion sit, right here, right on the bone. And in that moment, you have the thought, the traumatic event, I call it the initial sensitizing event, that is attached to the emotion, which is the charge, and then you have what's called a emotional energy stamp. And it literally goes into the columnar cells in the frontal cortex of the brain, which is where the memory is stored of that event. And then the energy from the emotions is also in the body's memory, in the cellular memory. So
Okay.
that sets up what's called a PTSD symptom cascade: anxiety, flashbacks, triggers, depression.
Even like a physical reaction.
It's a
because of the cellular
physiological reaction.
memory. You feel it in your
That's what
body, not just your emotion. Like your body
exactly.
feels it, right?
And
Mhm.
so when you're doing the EMDR, the beauty is you don't want to talk about the trauma, because then you restamp the energy field and you re-traumatize the PTSD symptoms. And so that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is the inappropriate and, dinosauric psychology to treat this kind of trauma. Now, with many veterans in hospitals, okay, they're doing things like, taking them out, riding on horses, the Red Badge program. They do storytelling. A lot of things can desensitize the trauma. But I've learned that why don't we just get to it and transmute the energy and use the tachyon energy fields? With tachyon energy, there's no past, there's no future, there's just the present. So it can be manipulated. It's physics. Energy doesn't die. It just transmutes and changes. So when you're doing this, you're not doing it to the person. They're working with you energetically. But I'm just going back into the columnar cells in the memory and the emotions and walking them through it to desensitize it. There's a whole procedure that's in chapter 8 of the second book. And I lay it out specifically to explain the whole process, what it is, how it works, and how you can move through it. Because I wanted to make it easy for people who want to understand how that works. And when Mike and I, Dr. Michael Lynch and I were working together on this, he was the one who said to Renae, this is how you explain how not only EMDR works, but this is how you explain how hypnosis works. And it works on a principle of magnetics, because energy is in a waveform, okay? And everything is magnetized. So what you think, thoughts are things. So whatever you're thinking, that's where you focus your intention, and you magnetize that back into your energy field. So that's why it's so crucial when you're working with a veteran or a combat military person, that you get to them as soon as possible after you give them an MRI to discern the degree of neurological impairment in the brain, because that's what is causing the TBI and the concussion injuries in our veterans and in our combat forces. That's what's causing the PTSD cascade. And then that precipitates the suicidal ideation. So once you treat the PTSD, the suicidal ideation should, dissipate, and you can follow that because you can take a pre and a post test MRI. We used to do this in our office in Chicago. I worked with a functional medicine doctor.
MRI. And I do want to just note that Brandon, who was commenting there, Shaman Sundays, is a veteran, and thank you for your service, sir. That does know a lot about these kind of treatments because he's been through them.
But I bet you the veterans don't know is what the U.S. Army is keeping from the American people and veterans.
But you got to tell us how you got there first.
Yeah, I will. I'll get there. So now after I completed the hypnotherapy certifications, listen, I studied with shaman on Indian reservations. I lived in New Mexico for 17 months while I was going through my hypnosis training. Okay. I did a lot of shamanic work as far as consciousness goes, to not only on my personal being, but with my clients that I was seeing while I was living out in New Mexico in Santa Fe. And so all these experiences, including the regression hypnosis, that not only did I have done with me personally, but with clients when I was going through my classes, taught me that we are so much more than just what medicine or psychology, those paradigms, they're Western-based ideologies. Okay. They don't leave any room for anything outside of those paradigms. And we are mind, body, and spirit. Okay. We don't live in a vacuum. We're not just our mind or, our physiology. We're spiritual. That consciousness doesn't die. It just shifts and transmutes energetically, no matter what you believe. Okay. I mean, look at how many books that doctors who have had near-death experiences have written about their own near-death experiences, that when they're having their NDE, they're on the operating table and they can hear what's going on, what the surgeons are saying, what they're talking about in the room when they come back into their body. Well, how do you explain that? Okay. There are things that modern medicine and modern psychology has no understanding of because they are ignorant with their blinders on. They can't perceive anything outside of the paradigms that they have been taught. And because they're licensed, they're being microscopically watched all the time. And if they get out of line, they can lose their license. And that's another story I can share later. But at this point, once I kind of evolved into those types of, lessons and learning, I realized, oh my God, there's so much more here that I need to learn and experience. So in the first book that I wrote, and my books are all self-published. I've edited them myself. I've designed the covers. I'm that person. Okay. Because I know how it needs to be done and I want to do it right the first time, right? Because the messages that I'm communicating are very important. And I need people to understand whether you're a lay person or you are highly evolved as far as your academic degrees. I want to be able to have everybody understand these processes and why and how they work. And because I have hundreds of hours in client sessions, I know what I'm talking about. Okay. Yeah. If I'm thinking about those hours and being in sessions, there were sessions in Santa Fe where I was doing hypnosis, regression sessions with patients who actually came in with medical and psychological conditions. And so there's a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. Brian Weiss. You probably have heard of him. He's written many books, many lives, many masters through time into healing. And when he was a psychiatrist and he was doing hypnosis regressions with his patients, like I was doing in Santa Fe with my clients, they were coming through and they were telling him things about his life. And there's no way they could have known that while they were in hypnotic trance. They just met him. How could they all know anything about him losing his daughter, a young daughter, right? And so it's in his first book. And as he progressed working with their medical or psychological issues, what started happening to him started happening to me while I was in sessions with my clients in Santa Fe. He would have like the Council of 12 and the Circle of 9, the elders, spiritual beings that would come through the patient that he was treating that would tell him not only about things in his life, which there's no way the patient could ever know, but they were telling him it was time for him to come out of the closet and stop worrying about what the psychiatric community was going to say about him if he started telling the truth about these experiences that these people were having that nobody really could understand because, could you measure these experiences and, longitudinal.
It's a lot to wrap your head around. Now you can just like Dr. Lynch would mention the Council of 9, I think you said Circle of 12. How do we know, like for our audience who hasn't had an experience with them, that
I'll tell you what
they are,
I was channeling some entity called the Group long before I heard of Steve Rother and the Group, who did spiritual seminars in Mexico, grounding the energies of the crystal skull. By the way, I was in his first seminar, the family of Michael. Okay. That was me. Okay. And these experiences I was having before I met these people. And then I would meet him and I'm like, oh my God, he's channeling the Group. I've been channeling the Group for how long in my sessions with my clients? How does that happen? I just meet you. I don't know anything about you, but we're channeling the same energy. So what is that? We're all tapping into that higher consciousness because why? Because my vibrational frequency has been elevated due to all the work I've done on my shadow side. Okay. Dealing with whatever my issues were and elevating my consciousness. And as you elevate your consciousness, you elevate your frequency and your vibration. And then you can tap into these higher powers or psychic abilities or mediumship abilities because we all have them. They are programmed, like Mike said, like an AI in our DNA, in our brain structure. This was the big conversation Mike had a couple months before he made his transition. He said, Renae, he goes, it's like the Matrix. It's like the Keanu Reeves. He goes, but I want to tell you, he goes, since I've been talking to the Galactics, and I have a lot of stories about him talking to the Galactics, they basically have told him that we've been programmed more than we could know. And when those alien abductions are happening, those hybridizations where they're, implanting implants and they're impregnating women to have their children.
Right.
Why do you think they're doing that? It's for our evolution. We think we're in control. And he said, no, he goes, the biggest lesson he had to learn is acceptance and endurance. He said he would drive the Galactics nuts because he was constantly, Mike was a seeker of the truth, right? So he was constantly questioning them on their behaviors and why they were doing what they were doing with us humans on this planet. And he said he drove them nuts. But then they started telling him things that because they started to trust him, that he wasn't a loose cannon, that he was a seeker of the truth. And because he was responsible in his communication of these things, they started confiding in him why they were doing the things that they were doing. And at some point,
that's so interesting. Let me ask you something. I made this comment. So not happy birthday, Bill. So I should say, Bill Metz, happy birthday. I didn't know it was your birthday. Happy birthday,
Happy
bud.
birthday.
I love you, Bill. Brandon mentioned that those are the thunder beings, right? Talking about this
Native Americans.
These circle of nine and whatnot. Are they syncretized? Not unlike, say, Isis and
you read this book by Dr. John Mack, Passport to the Cosmos, he goes into the whole Native American Sequoia ideology, their paradigms, and their belief systems, and that the aliens that are, been coming to our planet for millennia, that they've been trying to teach us because we're so devoid of our spiritual center from source, that we're in this monetization, this power and greed structure, that we are trapped, and we get so far removed from this that he said this is part of the problem why we're having so many difficulties on this planet. And this is why a lot of the Galactics have been participating with us humans, because they're trying to enlighten us and lift our vibration, understand what we're doing not only to the planet, but to ourselves. We are trapped in this evolutionary spiral where we're going down a rabbit hole because we're so devoid of our connection from source, whatever you believe that to be, because that's where we all came from. And that's where we're all collective. We're all part of that collective unconsciousness, as Jung had communicated in his teachings. So when Dr. Mike is telling me about these things, and I have to tell you, look, Mike and I were he was like my brother from another mother. We thought so much alike, and we were in such synchronicity that we could talk to each other for 5, 6, 7 hours. It drove his wife nuts. Okay. I said, yeah, he's cheating on you, but not in the way you think. Okay. Right. And we laughed about it because the conversations we had were so pertinent to what's going on the planet right now, to all this destruction, this mayhem, these wars, all these power struggles. This is not what was meant for this planet. And when you see the earth herself, she's basically trying to cleanse all this crap energetically. You think that these geological storms are happening on this planet for no reason? One of my colleagues, Dr. David Serrata, Sarita. He's pretty famous. I attended one of his lectures when I attended a ufology conference in at Joshua Tree in Palm Springs a couple years ago, and he was talking about his galactic experiences too. And if you ever go on his website and look at his videos, he's another brilliant, amazing person like Michael. And lately, he's been talking about the geological storms that are underneath the Earth, electrical charges that are recharging the planet herself energetically, like reinstituting this charge, because the Earth needs to repair itself from all the damage that we've done to her.
Hell yeah.
And consequently, our physical bodies, we're trying to transmit and take in all this light quotient energy, okay, in our DNA. But our bodies are so full of this dross, this chaos, that now what you're seeing is more violence on the planet. People are having anxiety and panic attacks. How many people in this country do you think are on Prozac? And by the way, it doesn't work. Okay.
We were just talking about that.
Not in the long term. That's what they're saying.
It doesn't work. Because trust me, when I worked at Loyola in Department of Psychiatry, the psychiatrist would say, "What are you doing to my patients? They're going off their meds and they're getting better." Yeah, because I'm energetically transmuting the trauma, so they stop getting their PTSD triggered and they're not depressed and anxious. So I'm raising their vibration back to where they can tolerate being in a body and dealing with life. That's always going to present you with challenges, right?
A lot of like magnetic changes, right? And
exactly
mechanical changes through peaks and valleys around and spikes around the planet.
Because think about it. Most of those medications, they're synthetic. They're alien to our body. Okay.
They're
longer
right.
The body can't handle synthetic substances. Okay.
It's
unless, of course, it might be
we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
We do have to say, disclaimer, we're not advising people of medical advice on the show if you're on Prozac.
You see this book?
I've taken both of those.
This book is called The Aliens and the Scalpel. It was written by Dr. Richard Lear. He's a podiatrist. And I met him at a ufology conference, actually, I think when I met David Sarita. And in this book, he literally shows pictures of implants and surgical procedures, where when they take the implants out of the abductees and experiencers and the metallic pieces fall apart, they have a memory and they start to grow back together the way they were before they fell apart. And they're not of any metallic structure known to man on this planet.
When you said that earlier, it reminded me, just real quick, I'm sorry, it reminded me of like Terminator versus what Avi Loeb from the Galileo project is going through right now, trying to get that kind of substance from the ocean. I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about.
Right, from the meteorites.
From the meteorite that was actually from out of the solar system. So that's basically what he wants to see as well. So when you say that and you think about that out of our solar system.
Right. Uma.
Right.
Yeah. And so when yes. So as you're asking me, like, how did I get to this point? I mean, oh my God, it's like, that's why I wrote the first book. It's 300 pages because I have story after story after story of these experiences that not only I went through personally with my galactic experiences, but with my clients in sessions. And that's why I write the books, because I have to get it out somehow, right? I mean, who's going to listen to me talk for 600 hours, right? Well, exactly. Yeah, but
that's what we're here to do. We're happy to do it. So thank you.
Yeah. So as I'm evolving in Santa Fe and I'm going through these metaphysical experiences, my clients in my sessions, they're telling me things about my past lives. And then they're telling me things about my current incarnation in this life. And I just met them. How could they know these things? They're in trance. They're in a deep state of alpha. In a hypnagogic trance state. How could they know anything about me?
Yeah, no, that's
No.
super interesting to us. We love
Mhm.
the idea of alpha states and often draw those parallels we were talking about on Rex's show the other night,
Yeah.
right? And I think you caught some of that when you talk about alpha and theta and hypnagogic
Oh,
states. It's the thing we've been talking about for
absolutely.
years
Yeah.
because so much phenomena centers around that, you
Mhm.
know, and it's not just alien abductions. It's a much bigger umbrella, and it's always some kind of phenomena, right?
Yep.
And
And
it's very
so when a client was telling me about my
Yep.
life and about the Council of 9, the Circle of 12, and I was thinking, oh my God, she's telling me things. How could she know these things about me? You know, I wasn't published anywhere as an author at that point. I wasn't even doing like seminars yet. So it's like, how could she know these things? And so this started opening up my collective, super consciousness and opening up to, wait a minute, there's more here than meets the eye. And that's when you could find me in a Santa Fe bookstore. I'd say to my guides, you know what? I need to know about something. Can you kind of guide me to the book? I'd walk into the bookstore and I'll be damned if that book didn't fall off the shelf and open to the exact page and answer my question. And that happened to me on more than one occasion. Okay. These are synchronicities. They're synchronicities, right?
Right. It's so strange.
And had these experiences not been happening to me, I maybe would have not continued to learn and research and keep looking for the truth of why are we here? What's the purpose of all of this? Why do these things happen to us? And when you get to that kind of a perspective, you do a lot of inner reflection. I've spent many hours by myself just thinking through these things, processing it, reading, educating myself, talking to people, doing seminars, so that I could find what the truth was for me personally. It wasn't just about me treating my clients from their trauma, okay? It was about me evolving spiritually myself. And when I wrote the first book, I was in Chicago, and I was working with a musicologist who helped me put together a CD. Now, this is the first book. It's really big. It's really thick. Okay. But I shared a lot of those experiences in that book. And that material, I have to tell you, it was being downloaded to me psychically. I was dealing with higher powers that were saying, Renae, you have the background in immunology, biology, psychology, medicine, environmental. They said, you have the abilities to articulate and communicate these paradigms in this book and have it flow logically, and also present the parts that have to do with psychic and mediumship abilities, so that people understand that metaphysics is a blending of science, physics, and spirituality. And all of those things were given to us by source, a higher power, to help us not only understand ourselves, but to be more empowered human beings while we're in a body. And we have many incarnations, so we have many times and abilities to grow and evolve over time. And again, I didn't get married maybe longer than 7 months. And I said, no, I'm out of here. I didn't have children by choice because I had too much work to accomplish in this one lifetime. I always knew that for whatever time that source kept me in this body, I didn't have any time to waste in romantic relationships that didn't serve a higher purpose. My whole life, I've been in service for the truth and to help people deal with trauma. So when I got out of the service and I went and got these degrees and I spent all these hours in clinical practice, I worked for traditional psychotherapy agencies, hospitals, Loyola, cancer centers, yada, 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 private practice, you name it. Mm-hmm. But I never stayed in them for very long because they always wanted to keep me in this tiny little bubble. And I'm the kind of person like Dr. Michael Lynch was. I'm not happy if I can't keep growing. Nobody puts baby in a corner. It's just not going to happen, okay? And so for me, this whole journey that I've been on, it's been a blessing and a curse at times. It's not easy to know things before they're going to happen. Do you think I want to see bad stuff happen?
You're going to say shit. I heard you, but that's okay. I told you
But
can swear.
but at the same time, okay,
Yeah.
if you can see things coming, then maybe, just maybe, like the Galactics have been trying to show us, maybe we can prevent it. Maybe we can stop these horrible things from happening if we just learn to work together collectively in peace and harmony. There's enough for everybody on the planet. We don't have to have wars and kill each other and steal and be power hungry and greedy. That's all fear-based mentality. That's what keeps us stuck. And we don't vibrationally elevate. If we could just understand that we're more powerful. The other thing that Dr. Mike taught me, and I probably knew it, but he was a good person to remind me, because even me, I get stuck too, right? I'm human. I get caught up in my head. Sometimes I overthink. My emotions can get out of control. If I get caught in that fear-based mentality, if I believe what I'm seeing out there, right? And so he was always good. And he said, Renae, he goes, look, you have to pick and choose your battles. I told him one time in the book, in the second book, I do a lot of little cute little quotes in the book, and he did some too. And he said that you have to risk it to get the biscuit.
That's a good phrase. I'm just showing the book there, available on Amazon.
And he said, make your baggage. What was the term? What did he say in here? He was so good at things. He would come up with things off the top of his head. The difference between the ballast and the baggage is one keeps you grounded and one holds you back. Lose the baggage and set yourself free. Dr. Michael Lynch, right? I mean, He had a wonderful comic sense of seeing the humorous things out of all the seriousness of life, right? Because, I can get very tunnel focused on focusing on doing what I need to do, right? But he would always say, come on, Renae, you just got to laugh. You got to elevate. He said, don't take everything so seriously. Enjoy the ride. Okay. And
Right.
I mean, yeah, because listen, the kind of work I've been doing all my life dealing with trauma, it is serious business. I'm trying to save people's lives.
That's
Absolutely.
right. Yeah.
And some people might say, well, you have a Jesus complex. Well, I can tell you stories about that too. But anyway, so as I learned all these things through my clients have taught me so much. My guides have taught me so much. My colleagues in this profession that I like to call parapsychology, they've been just so much more, enlightening for me, because it's so easy for me to get caught in all the physics and the science of it all, and dealing with all the traumatic issues. But they really helped me see that it can be fun. You don't always have to take everything so seriously. But the one thing that Michael's transition taught me, and I knew it was coming because he told me that the Galactics were around him every day for the last couple of weeks. And he knew his time was closer because they told him they were coming for him. Okay. And he knew it. And he was trying to prepare me for it. But you know what? You're never prepared to lose someone you love. Never. I don't care. I understand that there's no such thing as death, that it's just a transition of energy. And believe me, he's come to give me messages. He's given other colleagues messages since he's crossed into that dimensional frequency. But, his passing, and he was only 62 and I'm 66. He taught me that there's no time to waste. He said, there's no time to waste. He said, the hell with your license possibly being taken away from you. He said, do what you came here to do. He said, because once it's your time and the Galactics come for you, that'll be it. And if you don't finish your work, well, then you don't finish your work, right? And I don't know about you, but I don't really want to have to come back here and do this all over again because, this lifetime has been quite the challenge for me. And everybody thinks that I'm such a strong person, but I'm human too. And sometimes I just get really tired of dealing with all the shit I see around me.
Right.
Well, we understand.
No,
We all get tired of all the shit because it's like it doesn't have to be this way.
I think if Mike had a message for us, it was just to kind of like make sure people remember him, like put it out there. And it's part of how we got talking and, having the videos. And we talked about him a lot last week because his message was important and it was a lot there. And it's great that,
he was so
keep it going.
He was so undervalued with his information, his intellect.
He could talk about anything.
His kindness.
He
said to me that the Galactics, when they were talking to him, they were telling him that not in the very too distant future, that these earth changes, not only were they going to get worse, which we all, can see around us.
Exactly.
But he said the earth is going to be covered in what he called a charcoal powdery mess. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, the Galactics are telling him that they're going to remove like 30 million people off the planet.
I think he just heard this with me as well at one point.
Did he tell you that? And I have to tell you, when I lived in DeKalb, Illinois, while I was still, working as, undercover, not coming out, which is what I'm going to do tonight, being, who I really am instead of who people think I should be. I did a lot of work galactically while I was on that farm in DeKalb. I did a lot of meditation, a lot of shamanic rituals. And I had a psychic reader say to me, how do you know that you are going to be meeting and greeting the Galactics when they arrive on the planet to come and deal with the people? And I said, well, because they told me that part of my job was to decrease the fear in people when they started arriving, because they were going to collectively pick people up and take them off the planet. Because apparently when these earth changes happen, it's going to be like Pompeii was. The planet's going to be covered in this charcoal ash.
Oh yeah.
And you know what that means to me? Charcoal is like a detoxifying chemical agent. So like when you swallow poison, what do they tell you? Swallow some charcoal, right? I don't know, in the emergency room, that's what we did with a patient one time. And so
fish take it.
Yeah. And so basically, I guess they're going to cover and blanket the earth so they can, Genesis can happen again, right? Like Star Trek episode of Genesis, regenerate the planet, because we have polluted this planet beyond repair. I mean, it's that bad. And they're going to take a certain amount of people off the planet like they did with Noah's Ark, probably take you to another galaxy, repopulate another planet somewhere. And it's like, whether you believe that stuff or not, listen, this planet has been here for millennia. It's gone through so many evolutions, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Okay, these things are written on inside cave walls of indigenous people, of galactics with helmets on and spaceships, right? Centuries ago. Okay, how would they even know to put that stuff inside their cave walls? Okay, if they weren't visited by galactic, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them.
What's on the cave that we can't even see today, that don't exist anymore? The planet's so much older. We're just a fraction, a sliver.
Exactly.
And then you have the Hopi people putting the camp people underground.
I don't think we have to go to another planet. I think the Earth will take herself back if we screw it up enough, and it'll just happen all over again.
That's what him and Chris and I think.
We think it's probably happened.
Right.
Well, yes, but there may be a lot of people not surviving. I'm just saying.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
population control. See ya.
Happened
It's
before.
extinction, basically.
You know, when I lived in Santa Fe, I was there for 17 months going through my hypnosis training, and I went through a rigorous several months every day of hypnosis training. I didn't just do a weekend course. Okay. And then I was in a private practice of my own where I actually saw clients and did hypnosis sessions. And not only did I do past life regressions, but I did future life progressions. And
Okay.
those experiences were even fascinating. One of my clients in hypnosis, she saw me in 3 previous lifetimes. And one was in Egypt
Just gonna
as a
ask you about the high priestess.
high priestess scientist. But wait, okay, it gets even better. So wind the clock forward several years later, I'm working in Chicago for a holistic medicine doctor, a functional medicine doctor. So he treated all the train wrecks that the doctors couldn't fix. Workman's comp, PI cases, traumatic brain injury. We did hyperbaric oxygen therapy in our office. We detoxified your entire body. I mean, it was full service. And then I did all the mind, body, spirit work, because when a person goes through, whether it's a physiological or a medical or psychological trauma, their body doesn't retain it being fixed because they have the emotional energy charge from the PTSD. So then I would work on all the PTSD issues, and then Dr. Horvath would work on the functional medicine issues. But we did hyperbarics in our office, and we did that because he had a left occipital brain region stroke. He was paralyzed from the right side. His speech was slurred. He couldn't articulate properly. He was dragging his right leg. He had to walk with a cane. He couldn't write. He had to work with his patients. So luckily, we had both been through hyperbaric oxygen therapy training in Anaheim, California, several weeks before that. And we had bought the portable Viteris chambers, the big ones, okay, that you could take to health fairs, which we used to do. And in 5 weeks, his brain, the neurological connections, the synaptic dendrites started literally growing back connections. And it was subtle, but his speech came back. He was able to write again. He was able to walk without a cane. Okay. We put people in that chamber 15 years post-stroke, PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, Alzheimer's patients. His uncle had dementia. Okay. We had kids in there with autism, ADHD. I mean, bird flu, Lyme's disease. I got a real big education about hyperbaric oxygen therapy.
Can you tell us briefly, like, what is the hyperbaric chamber and what does it do? I know
hyperbaric oxygen therapy is literally oxygen under pressure. It goes from a high pressure gradient into a lower pressure gradient that literally goes into the cells, the RNA, the DNA, and it starts to turn them back on and tells them, turn them back on so you can start to grow connections again. So when you have a stroke, let's just say, okay, or you have diabetes and they want to cut off and amputate your limb, okay, you can actually grow those tissues back together. The military was using the hyperbarics to regrow and regenerate tissue and bone. Why they're not using it right now? For PTSD, to decrease the suicide rates in their combat military forces, and veterans who are killing themselves every day from suicidal ideation because of the PTSD, from the TBI and the concussion industries. I don't know, but I can tell you what, I'm going to come clean and tell you why at some point in this talk.
Yes, you are.
But I digress, because that's part of me coming out with being a whistleblower.
That's right.
So as I went through my hypnosis training in Santa Fe and did all my shamanic rituals, I don't care what anybody says. Those experiences were crucial to my evolution as the person that I am today. And that's why I write the books, because I've had these personal experiences myself, both professionally and personally. And they have helped me grow more than any academic studies. I have a lot of degrees behind my name, okay? But I didn't learn these things just from my degrees. I learned these from having these experiences myself. working through these transformations spiritually. And there's no better experience than experience. You can sit in a classroom. You can sit in a classroom and you can read all the damn books that you want.
You got to be
the thing that's going to teach you the most. Yeah, but the thing that's going to teach you the most is life experience.
Exactly.
And doing it is the real thing. And I'm sharing a link from John Hopkins,
That's right.
University. So, I mean, this is not, what
okay.
So, pseudoscience, and they like it. They're saying how it was used.
Let me tell you what happened last year. So I was hired by a doctor, an MD in Washington, to be a Department of Defense contractor for the U.S. Army. And I worked on 2 military bases here, Dunham Behavioral Health Clinic in Carlisle, PA, and Fillmore Behavioral Health Clinic in Cumberland, PA. And when they hired me, they knew my background. So they wanted me to assess and treat active duty combat military, men and women who would come back from Iraq or Iran, from having burn pit injuries, TBI, concussion, PTSD, suicidal ideation. And their mandate was to decrease the suicide rates in their active duty military combat. Well, because I had this background in hyperbarics and I had done all the research, and I worked with a doctor for 10 years in Chicago doing hyperbarics for these types of issues, I tried to educate them not only my research about it, but Dr. Murphy, an MD, who actually is in, I believe it's the Georgia legislature. He's a congressman. Last May 2023, he introduced a bill into Congress for them to pass funding for a pilot study program to do hyperbaric oxygen therapy in a VA facility. And I was trying to give them this information. And Dr. Paul Harch and Dr. Fogarty from LSU Medical Center did the research, the real research about how hyperbaric oxygen therapy, when you utilize it to treat TBI, traumatic brain injury, and concussion injuries, takes down the PTSD symptom cascade, which precipitates suicidal ideation. And they prove this in their research. And I'm trying to educate these people, right? So I can do what? Reach their mandate to decrease the suicide rates and save lives. And not only am I saving a military person's life, I'm saving their family who has to go through all the stress themselves of dealing with a combat military and a veteran where they're struggling. Some of my assessments, they didn't even do MRIs with these guys that came out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Okay. They just put them on drugs. The drugs don't do shit.
That's right.
The drugs do nothing. You want to give somebody extra strength Tylenol? Are you freaking kidding me? Did you not do a pre and post test MRI? So you know what the major of Dunham behavioral health said to me last year? He looked me square in the eye, and I'm a Vietnam era veteran. Whether I'm combat or not, my whole life has been spent treating trauma. He said, we don't fix them. We just patch them up and put them back out in the field. I wanted to punch him in his, you know what?
Right.
I'm like, how dare you? And do you know, out of 12 clinicians on those 2 bases, I was the only veteran clinician, the only one. So you tell me, what the hell is wrong with these people, right? They don't care. And then they terminated my contract after 3 months.
That's right.
And they said I was incompetent. They put it on the National Provider Database. Okay. And threatening to take my license away from me as a clinical social worker. And then even better, 3 months after I didn't work for them anymore, they sent me twice a non-disclosure agreement they wanted me to sign. Now, why do you think they would do that?
Government. It's the government.
Because God forbid I tell the truth to the American public.
They don't want anybody to know anything. It's
God
ridiculous.
Forbid I want to save a combat. God forbid I want to save a combat.
Pay your taxes and let's move on.
And you know what? And so if the worst thing happens and they take my license, so be it. I'm a minister. I've got a PhD, I've got a master's degree, I have a bachelor's. I don't give a shit. You know what? Thank you for setting me free, because now I can come out of the closet. I don't have to pretend. I don't have to be under a microscope and be afraid to do my work. You know, if this information would come out to like CBS News, Sunday Morning, okay, any of the major television networks, if they knew what the U.S. Army was keeping from the American public and their combat military and our veterans, they would be in an uproar.
UAP?
They would be in an uproar.
Well, so you have to think of it this way as well. It's not just the Army, but then you have all the other branches of military, and then you have the black ops military. We'll just go
all
with
of that shit.
all of
No,
that shit. Thank you. And yes, so it's not, I mean, it's not just one form, it's the whole entire government. It's ridiculous.
And you know what? For years, I kept my own galactic alien experiences to myself, because if I would come out like as a licensed clinician, they'd be like, "Oh, she's nuts. We can't send her any patients. You know, she's woo-woo, right?"
Right.
So when Roswell occurred in the 50s, and you know, people who weren't born until much after may not know that, but Roswell was this incident in the desert where a galactic couple of, you know, spacecraft apparently crashed, and aliens that survived it were taken out, put in underground facilities, experimented like they were microscopic, you know, bugs or something. And but the one of the majors or colonels who was involved in that cover up, his daughter, okay, and his granddaughter were actually being used as experiences, alien abduction experiences. And when I went to a ufology conference after I wrote my first book, I was supposed to interview these people, because my guides kept telling me, you're supposed to pick up where Dr. Mack left off, because you have the clinical expertise and the experience treating trauma, and you have an open mind like Dr. Mack did, because he actually clinically listened to his patients and believed what they said. And he did many, many hypnotic regression sessions with his patients. Okay. And he didn't feed them or coach them any information. This whole book is filled with their stories of working with Dr. Mack. And so I was told that part of what I was to do was to pick up where Dr. Mack left off, because Dr. Mack was basically taken out in 1994 in the UK as he stepped off of a curb and was run over.
He's not
very mysterious.
It's very
to
mysterious.
silence him. So then my story is kind of similar and a little scary. And now you will understand like why I'm telling you about this, because I said, screw this shit. I'm coming out with all the truth. So when I realized that that was one of the things that I was to do to continue with his work, and believe you me, this man was a Harvard academic trained MD. He was brilliant. Okay. And even Harvard let him do his research and his work, because he was so appropriate with how he treated his patients and how he taught his students and how he presented things, because he had an open mind. And everywhere that he talked about with this book, about why he did what he did, he said it was because we are here to evolve and not only save the earth, but save ourselves and to raise our consciousness. And this was what he determined. And he did a lot of great work. So when I then decided I was going to write the book about Roswell, I was going to title it like post-traumatic stress disorder post the Roswell incident. Well, after I decided I was going to do that, a lot of strange and crazy things were happening to me. I was in my car, my cute little car that I drive in that I got 5 years ago. And I was actually doing some side hustling. I was doing some Uber driving. And I was on a highway and it was abandoned, and it was in Downers Grove, Illinois. And there was no traffic. And I went to do a U-turn. And out of the blue, this big migrant farm worker truck filled with Mexicans, smashed into the right rear of my car, spun me around, hit me again in the front of my car. Like I was in and out of dimensional frequencies. I was so confused that day before the accident happened. I felt like I was going in and out of a dimensional frequency change. And I was so confused. I was even like texting while I was talking to one of my friends. I was like, I don't know what's going on with me today. It's like I'm in my body and I'm not in my body. And then the next thing I know, I'm in this accident. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So, of course, that disables me because of a car issue. And then
PTSD.
And then that in that same time frame, I go to sleep at night. I have this vision, this dream. I see this rectangular starship. It has to be like, I don't know, several football fields long with a draconian reptilian tail. And I look up and I see this and I go, what the hell is that? And then the next thing I know, I see this little boy's face, 8 years old, big brown eyes, like brown hair with bangs, very angelic looking. And he looks at me, he says, you don't want to go there and do this. I go, what? I go back to sleep. I wake up the next day. On my left big toe, there is a perfectly symmetrical purple triangle. Okay. On my left toe. It's not bruised. I woke up that way. It's not bruised. Okay. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? Okay.
Yeah.
And I go and I actually was doing some psychic readings that weekend. And so at the reading, I went and had a reading by another psychic medium. And I explained to him what happened. And he goes, they were giving you an upgrade. I go, what? They go, yeah, it's like when you put a CD in a computer and you do an upgrade. Do we do that anymore? No, we just download it from the internet. Right? And he goes, no, they were giving you an upgrade because of the work you're meant to do here. And I go, okay. And I have to tell you, when all these experiences are happening to you, you're trying to rationalize them. And this is what, I've found that when I've been working with people who've had abduction experiences or the hundreds of stories that Dr. Mack wrote in his books about them, we all are trying to make sense of, did this really happen? Are we imagining this stuff? Why are we having these bruises on our marks in our body? Why are we finding implants behind our ears or between our toes? Like, what is going on? Like, you're constantly questioning
extreme examples, right? They're pretty extreme examples when you're finding an implant. But I think phenomena occurs to a lot of people. They see things and the physics doesn't line up, and they go, "Oh," and then they talk themselves into believing, "Well, that didn't really happen."
Right?
Exactly.
That sort of thing. Let me ask you: was there relevance to the Mexicans driving the car? Because
and by the way, okay. I got the ticket that day. Okay.
Oh, okay.
I got the ticket because I was pulling a U-turn in a place you weren't supposed to do it. But I can tell you what. I looked up and down the breadth and length of that road. There was nary a vehicle in sight. So where did they come out of? The cornfield? Did they materialize?
What did that mean to you?
Well, what that meant to me was I was being warned not to write the book. That's what I was being warned. I was being stopped. And actually, that stopped me for quite a while because I was trying to make sense of what the hell just happened here. When I decided to write the first book, I wanted to, it was already written. I had published it on Amazon, self-published, and I was getting ready to go to a ufology conference at Joshua Tree in Palm Springs. which is where I met a lot of the people who had written books about these things, abductees themselves. I met Dr. Lear there, who signed my book, and he showed me and explained to me his work.
Lear? We need to know which Lear.
Roger Lear.
Roger Lear.
Roger
Lear. Okay, he's now made his transition several years ago himself.
Yes.
Mhm.
But you can see he autographed my book.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And you know, so I'm telling you the truth of my experiences. I have proof, right? Okay. So I'm not just telling you stories. I literally have met people. I've met Richard Dolan, who is an avid author and publisher of everything exoplanet wise. I've met him at MUFON conferences and conventions. I've talked to many of the abductees and experiencers at these conventions. And before I decided to go, I was telling Kristen earlier, before I decided to attend the ufology conference that they have, I think they do it every year now at Joshua Tree. It's a big retreat in Palm Springs. It's probably coming up again here pretty soon, if not already. I said to my guides, look, I'd love to go to this, but it costs money. Is it going to be worth my while? Can you please send me a sign? I swear to God. The next week, I had 3 women walk into my office in Chicago because I had an office on the riverfront with my doctor, my holistic doctor that I worked with. 3 women. They all had traumatic experiences with alien abductions. And one of the women was married to a lawyer. They were both prominent lawyers in downtown Chicago. They had successful practices. And she said to me that not only she, but her husband and her children had been being abducted. And she needed to know if she could trust me coming to see me to get her whole family treated, because God forbid it came out that these experiences happened to them, they could lose their practice and their livelihoods.
Wow.
And that was one of 3 people that came to me in 1 week. And that's when I said, okay, my guides, you win. I'm going to Joshua Tree.
Right. You asked for a sign and a sign was given.
And it's synchronicity. They gave it to me. That kind of stuff doesn't just happen out of the blue, right? You know, we are never alone here. We are never alone. Our guides are with us before we come into the incarnation, during and after. We are never alone.
When we say synchronicity, it's such a big thing. It's like you couldn't plan it. You couldn't.
Nope.
You can't work all that out. There's so many.
I can't make this stuff up, Chris.
No, we say that constantly.
Yeah.
We're like, we can't make this shit up.
It's like the physics doesn't work to even make some of these things happen. And when you really take it in, you go, that seems impossible. But there it is, you know.
But there it is. And as far as the high priestess Egyptian royalty story goes, when I was in Santa Fe going through my hypnosis training, I was actually treating clients. I was actually living in a pediatrician or ER doctor's home. He had these 2 Great Danes. He let me live there. He let me practice there, see my clients, as long as I took care of his dogs. He worked like 100 hours a week, right? He needed somebody who was responsible, but he didn't care if I saw clients in the house. And so I was doing a lot of these, you know, things in the house, doing I was working 2 different jobs. I was seeing clients. You know, I was doing shamanic retrievals. I mean, I was just learning so much because, you know, the Southwest is a wonderful place to do all these things because the energy out there is so different than if you were living in the city in Chicago. Okay. And so for me, it was a great experience for the 17 months I was there. And I learned so much that I was able to come back. But while I was there, I was treating a client in hypnosis regression sessions. And I met her because one of my part-time jobs was working as a Motorola salesperson of all things, right? I was taking apart pagers, cleaning them and reselling them while I was working in radiology in the medical records department in a hospital.
Yeah.
I was doing like 3 jobs. Okay. But you know, at that point in my life, who cared? I had the energy, I could do it. And so I regressed her to 3 past lives where she said she saw me. And one of those lives, she was an archaeologist digging up a site as an archaeologist, and she found my grave and my remains. And she said, it was you, and you were a high priestess scientist. And in Egypt in those days, the high priestess scientists were of royal blood. And they were the ones who were allowed to do regeneration. They actually had regeneration chambers in the pyramids. Can you believe that?
Yes.
Those
yes.
capstones were like crystals. I mean, fascinating. So then wind forward years later, I'm working with Dr. Horbatz downtown Chicago. Okay. And he was phenomenal because he would buy all the new energetic contraptions like the Tesla machines. And he had this woman come from the Ukraine, and she brought this computerized machine where you could take your fingernails and your hair, right, and put it on the machine. And what it would do is it would show you your whole medical, psychological makeup, your spiritual makeup. It was amazing. So I go, okay, I'm just going to do this for, kicks and grins, right? So I go, here, I'm going to put my hair out, have her look at it. She comes up with, high priestess scientist in Egypt. I almost fell off my freaking chair. I just met her. She didn't know anything about me. I said to Dr. Ken, I go, Ken, come over here. Because I told him about this, I don't know, a long time before that. He probably forgot, because half the time he was like, he was like, yeah, I know you're psychic. I know you're medium, yada, yada, yada. He's like, whatever. Okay. Believe me, I planted so many spiritual seeds with that man that by the time he crossed over, he was a totally different person. So when he saw this, he's like, okay, Renae, that's cool. He goes, not a problem. He goes, should I buy this machine? I go, well, it's up to you, Doc. If you want to waste your money. I said, but what's the point? I said, I'm a psychic. I'm a medium. I pick stuff up about people anyway. He used to have what he called the Lordex system. He bought like $100,000 worth of machinery where he actually would repair your back. He would literally open up the fascia and repair your back with all these machines. I mean, he taught me a lot about functional medicine. So I learned a lot about that.
Please let us know how that worked real quick, please.
Oh, about Lordex?
Yeah.
Okay. So Dr. Horbatz would treat all the train wrecks that the doctors couldn't fix with surgery. And so a lot of these machines, you could either lay down on them, supine, or you would sit up. And what they would do is they would drop down and open up the spine, okay, and open up the fascia so that as you started to heal, the parts of the bodies, like the discs that were in between, that would get flattened and rub bone against bone. That's where all the pain would come from, right? So what he would do is he would do his treatments. He would inflate the little spongy-like disc in between the spine so the bones would stop rubbing. And then he would repair the fascia surrounding the bone. And then he didn't do any kind of chiropractic bone cracking. What he did is he would put electrical stem on your back. He would put moist heating pads over. And then he would gently push on what? The body itself, because the body will naturally heal itself if you give it the opportunity. You don't have to crack it or cut it open, okay? You have to what? Give it what it needs, whether it's minerals, nutrition, water, whatever it takes to kind of repair those issues. So in that sort of thing where he would utilize those machines, I would literally see people be able to stand up and walk again. And the doctors would go, like, what are you doing with them, Dr. Ken? He goes, I'm just using the body's natural healing abilities, right? Mm-hmm. With these machines and the interventions that he was using so the body could repair itself without cutting into it or without putting metal rods in it. Once you fuse a spine, it's fused.
It's fused. Yeah.
That's it.
Those metal pieces are in there forever.
Right. We know.
It has a lot of capabilities, and it's like kind of like something you, I think, touched on earlier. about neurological pathways, right? I think that plays a big role in, say, addictions and negative habits and these sort of things.
Absolutely.
Building new habits and new pathways is really
Because it's
key.
all about frequency and vibration. When you restore the natural frequency of the body where it was previous to the trauma, the cathartic things that have happened to it, the body knows how to repair itself. You know, now look, if you need open heart surgery, okay, go for it. It saved my father's life. My father was one of the longest living triple bypass hearts patients by the world famous Dr. DeBakey. He probably lived longer than most of the patients. Now, some would say it's because he was ornery, okay, and stubborn, but who would know? How would you live an extra 50 years? Right. I mean, so modern medicine, if you want to, give a person a new heart or do a lung transplant, okay, all those things, by the time you get to that point, yeah, you have to do things that are, invasive.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
but when you start being symptomatic,
the pig kidney, he just died. I was right here in Massachusetts. It didn't
who was
work
that?
out. Somebody had a transplant. I think it was a pig kidney.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Okay, so case in point, I was fired from a doctor at Northwestern University when I worked there as a social worker because I was supposed to do what? Help find money and funds for these patients so they could have kidney dialysis treatments and so they could have what? Removal of their necrotic limbs from diabetes. So guess what? Because I understood hyperbarics, I would educate the patient and their adult daughter or son. You know what? You don't have to amputate the limb. If you just go and get hyperbarics, right, you'll fix the necrosis, of the wound itself. In modern medicine, there are 12 CPT codes in hospitals that they will approve of hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and one is diabetic wound care. So why wouldn't a physician at Northwestern, which is supposed to be a teaching hospital, utilize hyperbarics to save a limb? No, because they made 30 or 50 grand by cutting off your limb. I had an adult daughter.
You think it's that simple? Because when you look up and you Google hyperbaric chambers and this kind of stuff, it's not the newest technology, but it's a very legit technology.
And you know why they prevent it from being known?
Yeah.
Because the pharmaceutical companies make billions of dollars to put you on drugs.
Yes.
That complicate your liver function, which is like the lint screen in your dryer. Okay. And then change the biome in your gut health. There's something called the gut-brain axis that they are now finding that contributes to early signs of dementia, brain fog, memory disturbances, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Why do you think we put these patients in hyperbaric chambers? Because literally oxygen under pressure starts to diffuse all that shit out of your body. It's like a big detox.
Right. I saw
and
that.
really
like more triptyline and a bunch of like things like that, triptylines.
Yeah.
That giving you
and look, you can see that I don't just have a metaphysical perspective about what I do. I'm based in science, medicine, physics, immunology, neurology, biochemistry. That's what I put in the first book ad nauseum. Most of the crap I put in that book will go over most lay people's heads because that's what they wanted me to write about, because I had the abilities, because I had all those backgrounds and all those different paradigms, and I could articulate it in words.
Exactly.
Because you can draw those distinctions. There was a question out here in the audience from our friend Echo Leaf. Asks, Doctor, do you see any correlation between people that can fly in their dreams and psychic abilities? And you mentioned at the start of this that
because in my childhood I had many flying dreams where I actually could navigate where I was heading and coming back into my body. And that was long before I started reading any books about plant spirit medicine, about echolocation, about, out of body experiences. I was doing that when I was like 12 or 13
Astral
years
projection,
old.
Yes.
that sort of thing.
Astral projection.
Very
And I
big
didn't
with-
even know what I was doing, but I was doing it. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a great question, actually.
Fantastic.
And
Thank you.
I can guarantee you that every child knows how to do that. But if they tell the parent that they're doing that, the parent will be like, "No, that's not real."
Yeah, I think my parents looked at me like I was a little bit weird.
Depends
So
on
on
the
that.
parent.
Yeah, because
Because
they
now-
negate
No.
they negate everything, because we're not taught that we don't die. We're not taught that we're energy. We're not taught that we just shift and transmute from this body into a light body in a different dimensional frequency. Okay, we're not taught those things. We're taught fear-based religious dogma to control us so that we don't understand how powerful we really are.
Yeah. Hey, and
We're
that's what
powerful
you just
beings.
mentioned about the medical profession just trying to like make money off people in some instances, at least some.
In many
you look at
instances.
governments and the military sending our kids into wars that really just it seems so unnecessary. I don't want to give a bunch of examples because
It's a
of
lot.
everybody out here, but I mean, when you look
So-
at it, it's always a small fraction, and it's about money, and the money isn't even real.
It's
always
greed.
about-
Like we said
It's
earlier.
always about power, money, and greed. Always.
Small fraction of
and-
the population.
And people like me,
We do.
and people like me, you know what? I was told by somebody, "Oh, don't talk about all your credentials and your degrees behind your name. Just be humble and tell your story." You know what? I know that person said that to me, because they were trying to help me. But I got to tell you something. If I never put my degrees behind my name and I was telling you all this stuff, everybody would say, "Oh, she's doing woo-woo. This isn't based in physics or
Yeah.
immunology or
Where did that come from?
biology or science."
That idea of doing woo-woo, those limitations are like
Woo-woo.
this is what reality is, and it can't go beyond that, is being instilled in people. But we're capable of so much more.
Exactly. And there's a physicist, Brian Greene, Dr. Brian Greene. And one of his first books that I read, and trust me, I've read so many books. There came a time where I just said, "You know what? I can't read any more books." I said to my guides, "If you want me to know something, just freaking tell me. Download it and I'll pay attention." Okay. But when Dr. Brian Greene was talking about physics, there are many dimensional frequencies in physics, right? There could be 12, 13 dimensions, but from my studying with like Dwal Kul and Madame Blavatsky and a lot of the so-called alchemists that have walked on this planet, they all say the same thing. Okay. There is no death. It's just a shift in energy, and energy follows where your thoughts go, right? Energy goes where the thoughts flow. And so if you're constantly focused in a fear-based mentality, then that's what you're going to draw to you, and that's what you're going to manifest.
That's
And
right.
if you allow yourself to believe all the shit that we see on the news, because they're trying to keep us, in these little tiny spaces, right? So we keep our blinders on so we don't look for the truth, right? Because then they can control us better. I can't be controlled. The army has tried. And I said, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
I have never been treated so disrespectfully in my entire career as by what they just put me through. And I'm not talking about the army that I served in 75 and 79, when I was overseas, stateside and in Europe, treating trauma, because I was working with the finest warrant officers and nurses who were battle trained and understood the power and dynamics of patient care and compassion and being responsible to take care of your patient and leave no one unattended. Okay. I learned so much from those people. Then I end up 45, 50 years later working for the U.S. Army, and I deal with some major who looks like Doogie Howser. Okay.
Right.
Doogie Howser, who's in charge of the behavioral health, program at Dunham in Carlisle, PA. And he's telling me this shit. I'm like, really? You know what? It's so disrespectful when you talk to a Vietnam era veteran, whether I'm combat related or not, in that disrespectful capacity. And then you expect what? I'm supposed to be loyal to you? You have no idea who you're dealing with. You have no idea the level. They had no idea of the level of expertise that I could have brought to save lives.
The early Christians, the Gnostics, they believed in this being a sort of prison planet. And I'm talking about, 100, 200 common era, just, after.
In my second book, I call it The Game. It's a game on this planet. It's like a chess. It's like a chess game. It's like a chess game.
Ruling the entire planet. So a very small populace, meaning the archons, these spirits, were controlling the things that we did. And this life was a sort of an imprisonment, and that death was the next step beyond to get back to our cosmic souls. I mean, there's a lot to it, and there was some varying theories there, but it's so much different than the way people view Christianity today. But yet there was just 1% of people that seem to just change our lives, and dictate it, whether it's wars, whether it's the medical system and the way we treat people, whether it's our what we accept as belief and what we accept as woo. And it seems a little bit contrived to me. I mean, all of it just seems a little bit contrived.
Well, that's why when Dr. Lynch was talking to me about that, he said, Renae, he goes, there's so much AI programming already they've been doing to us for millennia. He goes, we think that we have free will. He goes, but they only allow it up to a point. Yes. Because they know if they allow us to have complete free will, we might actually destroy this planet. And guess what we're doing? They gave us free will, and look at what's going on in the planet.
Exactly. Yeah. We know, we understand. Well, we do. Brandon has a question out there that we just really need to ask, I guess.
Brandon asks, would you recommend a psychedelic mushroom?
I'm an open book. I came out of the closet. Whatever you want to know.
On our show.
Yep.
That's right. You were the first show that I wanted to do that with.
After Renae answers, I'll give you a little bit about my experience microdosing. But
okay,
would you recommend a psychedelic mushroom treatment for PTSD?
Okay, you know what? That's a really excellent question. Yes. I don't know if that person who's asking this knows of Timothy Leary, but in the 60s, Timothy Leary did a lot of psychotropic types of journeys with that type of thing. And trust me, you can have a lot of enlightening experiences with that. The indigenous cultures, like the Native Americans, they use peyote. Lots of people use mushrooms, and they will help you with the PTSD. But here's my problem with that. Do you want to be under the influence of any kind of controlled substance and escape the PTSD symptoms? Or would you actually rather cure it so they go away completely, the symptoms? Now, if you want to get, high and reach altered states of consciousness, that's your choice. But as a clinician treating trauma with my many years of experience, I would just rather get rid of it. I want it gone. So then you don't have to use anything. And then you're free from it. And you won't get triggered. And you won't have to worry about taking anything, whether it's a psychotropic or a medicine that a doctor prescribes.
Take now is about taking very small amounts. So you're not high. In my own experience with microdosing, and that's what it's called, micro, is extremely small amounts of a psychedelic substance, usually mushrooms.
It's
And
like
what
homeopathy.
it does is it opens up your mind to memories.
It's
Is what
look,
mine.
when I
I
studied
remember more things than the trauma gave. So when you're looking back on some traumatic experience in your childhood, whatever it be, maybe you're overseas, whatever it is, there's other things that come to mind than the painful experience, because your mind immediately goes to that painful experience when you think anything about a certain
because
time period.
it's an emotional energy stamp from the trauma. It's going to
Mhm.
stay here in the frontal cortex. When I was studying Dr. Hahnemann's work, he was a famous German physician, and he did a lot with microdosing through homeopathy and the law of similars. Look, I've studied everything: numerology, medical astronomy, homeopathy, plant spirit medicine. I mean, yada, 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 yada. That's why I said at some point I just had to stop reading because it was enough already. Look, I'm about getting you to the highest vibrational frequency so you can function at an optimal level. And so how can you do that if your body continues to get triggered from trauma? Why not desensitize the trauma? And then you don't have to take things to take the edge off. It's like I used to tell the psychiatrist at Loyola. Do you want to put a Band-Aid on the wound?
Right, a
Or
Band-Aid.
would you rather, debride it and get rid of it? Which one? I don't know. It's your choice, right?
The thing is, you've been talking about hyperbaric chambers, hyperbolic chambers. Baric. I'm good, right?
I call it HBOT, HBOT for short.
HBOT. But we don't have that right now. I know you're trying to get the word out there and the message and stuff. So do you really think that microdosing, like I watch stuff and I read stuff,
And you watch me.
Okay.
All right.
And
okay, listen. There's a company called oxyhealth.com. OXY oxyhealth.com. And they sell all different sizes of hyperbaric chambers that are portable.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from the smallest up to the biggest, okay? Because that's their specialty. And they do training, and they will train you how to set that up in your home. So what we used to do in our practice in Chicago is if we had a patient that had Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, bird flu, Lyme's disease, PTSD, we would have you rent the chamber in your home for a month for $1,000 a month.
That's where I was going with this.
That is unheard of.
Insurance doesn't cover it or anything. No insurance covers this. So
insurance will only pay for a certain amount of CPT codes for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but you have to get a doctor's script saying you have a medical condition and they're prescribing hyperbarics. And then you go to the insurance company and you say, okay, my doctor prescribed this for this medical condition. Okay, how many sessions or whatever will you pay for, basically? Although there are freestanding hyperbaric oxygen facilities all across the country, you just have to find them.
Right. And that's probably helpful, as a lot of these, as I see, are pretty expensive.
I was trying to, the last year, I was trying to work with a musician who does charity work to do charity gigs to fund hyperbaric oxygen therapy to treat our active duty military. Mm-hmm. And I was going to try to get those set up myself. But the issue is that those facilities usually have to be overseen by a medical doctor if you're going to utilize insurance, because this whole country that we live in is all insurance based. Unless you go into holistic, alternative complementary medicine, which usually people end up paying out of pocket. And more people are willing to go and buy hyperbaric chambers or rent them because they have elderly, parents who have Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. Doctors put them on 15 medications and they're like in la la land all the time. Okay. Right. They're not getting better. And if if this pilot study program that Congress passed funds for, and I don't know which VA facility they're going to do it. I know Dr. Murphy is a congressman, but he also got the legislation passed just April the 16th, by the way. It passed to put this in a VA facility. I don't know where they're going to do it. Maybe Dr. Murphy is going to head it, but Congress passed the legislation April 16th. But yet I'm the troublemaker, right? Trying to save lives,
Right.
I'm just saying.
Excuse us for 1 second. Go ahead.
Oh.
Oh, I was going to say, that's what I was trying to say.
From your grave.
Do it again.
What is that?
This is Altered Beast.
Rise from your grave.
And that's class. And I'm just going to say one more thing about the microdosing. It's not necessarily a bad thing, and there have been huge strides in psychotherapy with it. Brandon, if you want to talk more about that offline, I can tell you a little bit about it. But
no, I look, whatever helps someone from wanting to commit suicide, I say go do it. If that's where your consciousness feels that you need to go, and it doesn't have like long-term side effects like medicine usually does,
or depression in general.
If it takes away the depression and you don't want to kill yourself anymore,
I don't know.
Yay, go for it. Okay. Look, people have been doing psychotropics since the beginning of time. Indigenous cultures.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's
the beginning of time.
Cure for suicide. I didn't say that.
Not at all.
I'm just gonna put that out there.
Yeah.
Sorry. But
it's a lot. It's a lot. Really, yeah.
But hyperbaric is very interesting, and you really are behind the hyperbaric treatments.
Because I worked with it for 10 years. I saw what it did for how many, not only medical, but psychological conditions. I mean, I lived it. I used to put Dr. Ken in the chamber. I used to go into patients' homes and train their adult children how to operate the hyperbaric chamber itself. I saw people get better without medication.
Right.
Okay, I lived it. So when I'm trying to educate somebody to save a life of a military service person, I'm doing it for all the right reasons. I'm not being incompetent. When you tell me I'm practicing outside of the scope of evidence-based psychotherapy, well, why did you hire me? You knew I had all this background. Why would you hire me and put me in that situation in the first place? And then accuse me of being incompetent.
No, we understand that. We're right with you, but we just need that to pass Congress or whatever government.
It just passed. The pilot program just passed April the 16th. If you look it up, it's Dr. Murphy, MD, and you could probably find the legislation. And then look, I haven't looked to see where they're going to set this up, the pilot program, but I can tell you, Dr. Paul Harch, Harch, and Dr. Fogarty from LSU did the research about HBOT therapy in relation to treating PTSD that then predisposed you to suicidal ideation. They did the research. It's out there. Why would you not be utilizing what's already been done that's been proven to be safe and effective? I don't get it. The only reason why? Power, money, greed. Let's keep people sick. Let's keep people sick because then we can control you better. Right?
Exactly. And charge you for it. And we
can charge you for drugs.
What about the work? Now that we covered that, I think pretty well. Mm-hmm. What about the work you were doing before Dr. Lynch's passing? What were the things you guys were working on together? And let's maybe talk a little bit about that because it is getting a little bit late.
Okay. We had many long discussions about how the earth was evolving, how the galactics were intervening with our consciousness and why they were intervening with our consciousness, and that they gave us chance after chance after chance over millennia so that we could evolve our consciousness to not only pollute the planet, but to have more peace, harmony, and tranquility. But what the Galactics, we were showing to them was we were irresponsible children. We were not progressing. We were still in the adolescent phase of our development. And because of that, okay, you're seeing more and more chaos on the planet. And the Galactics are not happy with all that, let's just say.
So when you
And
say
so-
galactics, is that an umbrella term for all the?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Because maybe I should use the term the hierarchy.
Yeah, kind of like what I was saying about
spiritual
synchronization with
spiritual
our God,
hierarchy.
right? Things we call God, things we call other ones. If you're Nordic, you might say Odin, you might say Thor. Do you think there's a synchronization between that and the Galactics?
Okay, so when Michael said when he would talk to the Galactics and they would have conversations with him, if he felt like they weren't being exactly upfront and honest and giving him all the information, he told me, Renae, I'm going straight to source. So he would go to God. He would just bypass the Galactics because he said, there's a little red flag here. They're not telling me everything because they don't want us to know what they're up to, right? Because if they tell us what they're up to, well, what are we going to do, right? Maybe we'll rebel even more. I don't know. But he really felt that they were trying to work with him to give him information because they felt that when he disseminated information, he did it in a very articulate but logical manner. He didn't overreact emotionally. He was grounded, and they felt that he could communicate these higher principles of consciousness. But what Michael kept finding was that he kept being challenged about, well, how do you know this? Blah, blah, blah. Like people would start to criticize him and make him look like he was, I don't know, woo-woo, basically, for better terminology. And he would start to get really discouraged about it because, as you know, Michael was very thorough in his research. Yes. That man sometimes that man did not sleep for days. Okay.
I believe that. And he went straight to the monad. So, yeah.
He went straight to source. And he told me, Renae, if you're ever confused, if your guides, you don't feel like they're giving you clarity, he said, just go straight to source. Go into your meditative state. Go into alpha. He goes, theta. Go into your meditative state and just allow that information to come through. He said, because that comes straight from source, and just talk to the creator, whatever that is for you. And those were the kind of things that he was trying to communicate when he was doing his interviews and his podcast. But, distraction on this planet is a big deal. Mm-hmm. People want to be entertained so they can forget and get away from their pain for a while. So when you're talking about ghosts and paranormal things, it's fun, it's entertaining, but it's a distraction. And it takes people away from working on what? Themselves. Because people sometimes are in so much pain that they don't want to or they can't look at themselves. So it's easier to have a distraction like a paranormal conversation about a ghost, or a cemetery or an entity attachment. And while all those things are wonderful and they're fun and exciting, they prevent us from evolving our consciousness.
In some cases, because a lot of cases like ours, for instance, we research. We need to know the hows and whys.
But you do the research, though. You're not just doing it for entertainment sake. You actually do the research.
Distraction in general. So it could be anything. It could be a new car. You could research new cars.
Ooh,
I've got Carvana on in a different tab, and and it's a distraction for me if I'm working here.
I'm crazy.
I'll go. Would that be nice?
And the other thing that Michael was trying to communicate was about tachyon energy fields. Mm-hmm. So when he was explaining to me, because he said, well, my passion, if I could have been a physicist, I probably would have been a physicist because I just love it, right? I find it fascinating. It's constantly exploring the unknown and learning new things about the universe, right? And so when he was talking to me about tachyon energy fields, he would explain to me, Renae, this is why EMDR works. This is why hypnosis works, because you're essentially tapping into tachyon energy field. So there's a story when I was in Mexico working with Steve Rother and the group, and we were channeling, and we had a crystal skull energy. We were actually working with Mayans, grounding the crystal skull energy.
The Maya?
The Maya, like real shamans. Okay. I've done so much crap in my life. Okay?
Yeah.
I did so much crap. It's ridiculous. Okay. So so this is another story about tachyon energy fields before I even understood what they were. So in this 10-day spiritual seminar in Mexico with Steve Rother and the group, I was in a cabana the night before the first day that we were to do our in-class seminar. And I had 3 other of my co-mates in the cabana. And I was doing this energy thing, right, with them. And then the next day, Steve goes, there was somebody here in one of the rooms last night, and they were doing this energy thing. So we're going to do it today in the group. How did he know that? Because we channeled the same group. I had been channeling the group months before I met Steve and Barbara Rother, right? So then the next day he goes, we're going to see if we can send the mosquitoes away for like a couple of hours, right? So it's the family of Michael. It's 44. 44 is in numerology. It's like what? A master number. 11, 22, 33, 44. They're all master numbers. So we're in the circle, 44. We're all collectively holding hands, and they're doing the guided meditation that I was doing the night before. And before you know it, the energy starts doing this in the circle, right? And you know that scene in Contact where Jodie Foster goes down that wormhole?
Yes.
I was in the wormhole. I was flying. It was the exact same thing you saw in the movie in Contact.
Wow.
I could not believe it. It was like being on a Star Trek episode, hitting Mach 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay.
Mhm.
Boom. I had never had it.
Like you left your body, or was it more just mental, like a thing that flashed in
it
your
was
mind?
here in my third eye. I had this experience.
I understand that. Okay? That's gnosis. Yeah.
Right. We understand.
Oh, totally. I mean, I even saw the eye of God one time when I was meditating. Trust me. I've had so many of those experiences. And you know what? When I came back from that experience, I was so changed, because my ability to understand how powerful I really was, that I could do that was amazing to me. And then do it in a group of only 44 people. Can you imagine collectively if we had even 4,000 people on this planet and we did something like that to raise the energy of this planet? Do you not see what we could accomplish? It would be amazing.
I think David Wilcox, from like, I think he did that a couple of years ago. He tried to do that to raise everybody's energy at one point during the day. I don't know how that worked out for him, because
It's a limited group. Well, think about something like holidays, right? Like if you could do a holiday and have everybody say, okay, hey, we're going to do this at this time.
Yeah.
Right? And then, of course, it's tough because of time zones, but
but still,
it's still pretty interesting. Yeah.
And when I was writing the first book and I was talking about medical astronomy, and then I met David Sereda, and David communicates with the planets and their frequency energetically. I mean, how about that? How amazing is that? And he actually talks with the galactics, the higher consciousness, and I give him information too about stuff, you know? So we can all do these things, but who's going to teach us this? Everybody's so caught up with going to their jobs, getting a paycheck, paying their bills, raising their kids. Everybody's so distracted by their life.
Too busy to think.
Too distracted.
And it's a tool in politics. And this is not, partisan in any way, but it's absolutely
a distraction.
Yes. You're kept too busy. For example, a very simple modern example is in the 60s, you could have couples where, the stay-at-home mom was like more prevalent than not. right? And then economics changed because boy, she had some time on her hands, and we can't let the women get too
Don't forget they
too
gave her
smart, right?
drugs,
Because
too.
we went through that with the witch trials, right? And that we got to get her working too, because she has to
Well,
be busy.
look what they're
And
trying to do. They're
women-
trying to take away women's rights for their own bodies. Now,
That's
really,
Yeah.
why
that's
would
all-
you want to go back to the dark ages unless you want to keep controlling us?
Exactly. Fuck yeah.
No, we
no,
agree with you.
there's
We agree with you.
there's no spiritually conscious purpose for trying to control people in this manner except for fear,
That's right.
power, money, and greed.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah, no, it is.
Period.
And it is to keep you busy, because anybody who's got enough idle time, and this is probably why they hate people that have idle time, that are on disability and different things, because you start to think and you start to see a bigger picture. Like, well, these people are just going off to work to do the thing just so they can die,
To do the thing.
just so they can just do the thing and be done with it.
That's it.
Right. And not really think about what's going on. There's
And
so much going on in the world of politics.
when
but
you
nobody's really paying attention. The majority is not.
when
Right.
you have a alien abduction experiences, or whatever you want to call it, alien abduction syndrome is what Dr. Mack coined it. That was his clinical terminology for it.
Mhm.
But whenever you have those experiences, your consciousness elevates significantly, and you start to see new paradigms that you never focused on before. And when you do that, you can no longer go back to the darkness of the past, because you are now enlightened. And when you're enlightened, you see all the drama and the bullshit, and it's unacceptable because you understand it doesn't have to be this way. It's ridiculous. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
You know,
It
and people like us, we are fighting to elevate the consciousness of this planet.
Yes.
We are in the trenches doing what we came here to do, and we keep getting distracted. So today, the last 24 hours when my internet wasn't working,
Oh, you had a really bad day.
did you think I was going to be able to do this on an iPhone? Okay.
No. No, we did not.
I mean, give
Like
me a freaking break.
Right. Right.
Give me a freaking break. So do you know what that tells me? Whatever was trying to distract me and control me and sabotage me, guess what? They failed.
That's right.
It does
Because-
speak of like
Because
dualism.
I'm a
right?
problem.
It's
No,
like
because
good
you know
and evil.
what?
There's
I'm a
good, there's
problem
evil.
solver.
They're not going to let you get the word out because the other
They
side
don't want
doesn't.
me to talk. And how do I know that the U.S. government and the Army isn't listening to my phone conversations?
Oh, they
and
are.
They are.
and know that I'm onto them as a whistleblower, because their mandate is to decrease suicide, but yet I gave them the solution, and what did they do to me? And they're trying to railroad me. It's like, I'm sure they're listening to everything I'm saying right now. Do you think they know? Do you think they didn't purposely try to screw up my internet? I've never had a problem with my internet here. I've been here a year.
Government? You didn't tell me that
Until
earlier.
today.
You think it's the government doing that and not spirits? You legit think that
No,
was
I listen.
or a
The
combination?
government, the government can track us as long as you have something that has a computer chip in it.
We know about
They
that.
can track you.
Oh,
Mhm.
we know all about that. Way too.
We know.
Okay.
And
It's
chances are good I'll get audited tomorrow.
And by the way, David Serrato was telling a story one time. He said he literally had the Black Ops helicopters
Okay.
when he was doing his whatever he was doing, his stuff. They would be circling around his home. Okay, with his wife and his kids in the house.
That's
Right?
weird. And
Okay.
yeah, Heidi Hollis on, and she had said the same thing. And do you think
Those black
it-
helicopters.
Yeah.
Yep, they're a
So
thing.
we've had actually a bunch of people on. Do you think that that's actually we're going to say aliens or the government? What do you think about that?
Okay, so when I wanted to interview this woman regarding the Roswell incident and write that book about Roswell and trauma, the government, the military, they hid all that because of the technology that they gleaned from those ships, okay, and those
Okay.
crafts. And so over the years, they've taken that technology, they reversed it to figure out how it all works, right? So
Mhm.
that they can do what? build up the military complex, have power and over other, countries, right? And and then they took the alien technology, and in return, the government said, okay, we're going to let you take our people, experiment on them, whatever, okay, in exchange for the technology. Give us more technology. And they've allowed this to happen. You don't think our government knows that this is happening to our people? Yes.
So that's what Dr. Mike had said to us as well when I asked that question.
Yes. And one of the conversations that we had about that was, and Mike said to me all the time, he goes, they're constantly watching me. and he believed in the men in black. And trust me, those men, they'll show up at your door. They'll knock on your door, and they'll show up at your door, and they will try to intimidate you. Mike told me a story that they came one time and they started interrogating him, and they were threatening to kill him if he didn't shut up.
Yes, they did that to our friend Kaz Clark as well.
Yes.
They were on
and
here.
he said, I'm not afraid of death because we don't die. He goes, so do your worst. And he goes, there's nothing you can do to me. He goes, there's nothing you could do to me. You could kill me. You could take my body. He goes, but I know I'm going to live on and I'll be fine. And then they let him go.
So how weird is that? It's so weird.
I said, and he said to me, he goes, oh, this was the other thing too. He's like, he goes, and they've told me about you. He said, you're a vice admiral on a starship. And when they come and get you, you're going to be returned to your ship. And I laughed because every year that I would do the hypnosis conferences in Skokie, Illinois, I would walk into the vendor's room, and there was a woman in there. And this was before I even knew any of this stuff, right? She would salute me, and she'd like, Commander Nagle.
That's
how do you know that, right? And then when Mike's telling me this stuff like a couple months ago, I was like, are you fucking kidding me, Mike? I go, let me tell you this story about this person who used to salute me all the time and call me Commander. And he goes, no, he goes, you have been tested your entire life with tower moments to see how you would withstand the pressure. And, there's this thing called the Kobayashi Maroon in Star Trek, where Commander Kirk figured out how to win when he wasn't supposed to be able to win. And I don't know if you remember that in one of the Star Trek episodes. And because he never liked to lose. And Mike said, you're like Kirk. He goes, you look for a win-win scenario. He said, because they exist. And he said, you piss people off because you just don't tolerate their shit. You just do what you need to do. He said, you're focused. He said, you just keep doing what you do. He said, because eventually when the Galactics come for you, you're just going to be in your starship anyway. He said, so just do what you need to do and just ignore their threats. And just like they did to me the last 24 hours, trying to sabotage me to do this podcast. Right. God forbid I say the truth, right? Because, it could cause a disturbance. No, because they want to keep controlling us. That's why they do this shit to us. So
you got to re-articulate your plan. It's like the trouble with tribbles. At first, those tribbles were spreading everywhere. And
how did they know?
Yeah.
How did whoever who's tried to sabotage me today, how did they know I was going to do this podcast? Because I didn't even market it until this morning.
That's right.
I've sent out how many event blasts on Facebook with my many colleagues and associates over the years that I've known in not only the paranormal and the ufology community, but the spiritual community. Okay. I've sent it to astrologers that I've worked with. I've sent it to physicists. I even sent stuff out to people like Greg Braden and his people. I sent things to Steve Rother, who channels the group. I think I missed Chiron, but if he sees it, he sees it. So, I spent hours today marketing it, but this stuff started happening to me yesterday.
Right.
My internet started going out yesterday.
In advance.
Yes.
In advance, so they could sabotage me, so I wouldn't talk about these things. Well, guess what? That's out of the bag now. And also, here was the other thing too. This morning on CBS Saturday morning, they do their news segments every Saturday. So today, because it's Memorial Day weekend, they did a whole segment on the Red Badge program, which is out of Seattle. And Tom Skerritt, who is a veteran and an actor, he was in so many movies. He was in Top Gun with Tom Cruise.
Yes.
And a lot of very, very well-known movies, but he's a veteran. I didn't know that. So today they did a segment. Dana was the interviewer. She did a segment with Tom Skerritt about the Red Badge program and talking about how veterans were utilizing storytelling to desensitize themselves to post-traumatic stress disorder. And I sat there and I thought, well, that's good. Anything that helps them do that. And then I thought, this is bullshit. On top of this, you know what? I'm going to take advantage of my mouth and my ability to communicate as a writer and an author. So I did this whole thing about the Department of Defense and hyperbarics and suicide and their mandate and all the crap. And I put it right there on CBS and I sent it to underneath Tom where he did his interview. I don't care anymore. I'm tired of keeping my mouth shut. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to save lives before I check out of this body. This is what I do. I'm a trauma person. This is my whole career, my whole life, what I've spent doing this. I'm not going to give up now just because they're threatening to take my license. Screw you. I don't care if you want it that bad. Take it. Okay. Yeah. I just want to save lives. Do you know how many? And I also contacted Senator Bob Casey in Pennsylvania to try to alert him to what's going on with the Army as far as hyperbarics. He just passed legislation in Congress to get them to pay for our combat vets who come back from Iraq and Afghanistan suffering from burn pit symptomology that affects their lungs, that causes cancer. They weren't going to pay for these veterans to come back to treat them when they cause the problems themselves. It's like, really, this is like Vietnam all over again.
Right.
When are they ever going to learn to take care of their soldiers? I just don't understand it.
We don't understand that. Believe me,
I don't understand it. And I can't in good conscience keep my mouth shut anymore. I don't care what they try to do to me. Screw it. I'm tired of watching our people suffer. And it's not only our military that suffers, it's their entire family, their wives, their kids, their spouses. They all suffer. This is not right. So unless they put a bullet in my head and shut me up, well, I'm going to keep writing books. The next book.
No, we want you to stay at it. And we want to tell people where to get those books.
Yes, please.
And we really need to get to
they're
that.
All the two books are self-published. They're on Amazon.com. And the second book, I just uploaded the ebook last week. So if they want to read about the EMDR, the tachyon energy, the protocol for trauma, it's 128 pages. It's a quick read. I promise I didn't use very big words. So the average person, can understand it. And I put in there, I talked about hyperbarics. So that's in there. And if they want to reach me, they can find me through, Facebook. They can message me. But, and I will answer all replies as long as I'm not dealing with romance scammers.
Oh God, here we go again. Yes. Yes.
If you want to hit me up for a date or you want money, unless you're going to talk to me on Facebook so we can have a conversation, go away. It's not going to happen.
Mysterious person that you don't know, but you accepted their friend request because you saw
what
the
I was
other
saying
people,
to you, Renae, earlier.
and they go, "Hey, how you doing today?"
And then you go.
You know what? I actually have had several conversations with women in the past couple of weeks about the specific pandemic, I call it. It's a $30 billion industry where romance scammers are presenting themselves as celebrities on Facebook. And they're trying to, romanticize you. And then once they lure you in and get you, in there, then they ask you for money for things like business reservations, phone encryptions, Steam cards. It's like, really? Yeah. Listen, unless you're going to have a face-to-face conversation with me so I can see your face, hear your voice, and you can answer my questions, you better not, don't try to talk to me, because not only will I get in your face and call you what you are, I'll block you and I'll report you. So let that be a warning. Like I said, you can take the girl out of the army, but you can't take the army out of the girl, because I will still protect those I love and my clients and myself from anybody who has nefarious purposes that wants to hurt people. I'm a light worker. This is what I came here to do, but I'm also not a pushover, and I have good limits.
We think you're doing a great job.
Yes.
Renae,
thank you.
I think you're kicking some ass, and I think you brought a very good and positive message to our audience tonight.
I hope so.
Thank you for joining us. Where is the
Yes.
best place people can find you?
Well, again, just Facebook message me. Okay.
Renae Nagle.
Because if I give my email right now, I'll have 1 million emails that I have to go through, and it's Memorial Day weekend. And
We've got the time. We're all kept too busy.
But Memorial Day weekend should be to honor those who gave the biggest sacrifice, their lives. Okay, it shouldn't be about potato salad and hamburgers on a grill. Okay, I mean, these are people who spent their entire lives serving their country, fighting for causes, God forbid, for freedom. We should have one day where we honor them, and not have to worry about, well, let me see, should I go to a movie today? Oh, maybe you should go to a cemetery and put flowers on somebody's grave that served their country. I don't know. It's just a suggestion.
I think that's wonderful and a great point.
Okay, kids, thank you for the fun. I hope I didn't distress you too badly.
Oh no, I think we can tolerate it.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It was wonderful to talk to you. We've really enjoyed it, and we hope you'll come back and keep working on this work that you and Dr. Mike have been working on for a long time. Very interesting. Lots to think about. And you guys get out there, get our books. I mean, check them out. This is great information. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Oh, by the way, tell people about the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash.
Oh, the Bash, Gettysburg Bash. Yes,
it's July 26th, 27th, 28th in Gettysburg, the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash.
Are you going to be there?
And yes, I'm going to be working a vendor table with Lynn Monet, my colleague. I want to give her a shout out. She's an RN, and she's done a lot of work with paranormal community. She has several books herself on Amazon.com, Lynn Monet. And I think I'm going to be not just maybe selling the second book, but I actually want to do some readings for people. So, hey, yeah. So like if I have a veteran that walks up to me and he wants me to do some EMDR on him, I'm going to put up a screen and do my thing, or just talk to him and hear what he has to say. But it's to raise funds for wounded warriors.
It's wonderful.
And so, yeah. And I think that bring your kids, bring your family. There's going to be lots of cool vendors. They're going to be energy workers there, readers. It's going to be fun, but it's rewarding. And they're going to be speakers too. Mm-hmm. So I'll be at one of the vendors' tables. Maybe next year, if I'm still here in a body, maybe I'll be a speaker. Okay, guys. I just wanted to tell you that too.
Well, we appreciate that.
We think that's wonderful.
Back and we'll
do this again.
Okay, kids, so take care.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good, safe weekend.
Bye.
And, if you're you see a soldier out there, say thank you for your service.
Absolutely.
And we want to hear from our buddy Greg Koss. We were working on trying to
Yeah.
speaking of veterans, he's a Vietnam veteran, and we hope to hear from him soon. And that's all we got. We'll
Hey,
see
by
you
the
next-
way, one more thing. Tomorrow is the 26th. So at 2 p.m. At I think it's Fool's Cemetery, they're going to be doing a commemoration for Dr. Michael Lynch.
Really?
2 p.m. tomorrow. Yeah, Veronique, his wife, posted it. She sent me the information. Vicky Main, I think, talked to me about it. And the funny thing is, I think it's called Fool's Play Cemetery. Now, isn't that ironic?
Yes.
To call it cemetery.
Yes.
It's so apropos for Dr. Mike, right? Okay, because his personality, right? And so at 2 p.m. tomorrow, they're gonna do, I think, just a meditation in honor of him. So I'm gonna be doing prayers at the time. I talk to him all the time anyway, but that's just part of honoring him because he is a wonderful human being and he deserves it.
Yes,
so just wanted to let so anybody who knows him, 2:00 tomorrow, get yourself in a meditative state, send light and love to not only his family, but his kids.
Yes.
His kids.
2 Eastern.
He had just
Eastern
just wrote
time.
her up. Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, well, actually it's in St. Louis. So it'll probably be an hour. I'm in Eastern Standard Time. So if it's I think there it would probably be if 2:00 there would be maybe 3:00 here. And you guys are in Rhode Island, so maybe it would be, it's still Eastern Standard Time with you in Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, they're in Central, so it'll be
but it'll be St. Louis, Missouri time.
Yeah.
So I think they're an hour ahead.
1:00 Central, or I should say 1:00 Eastern, 2:00 Central. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye.
You guys are awesome.
Excited.
Thank you.
Love you guys. Take care.
Thank
Love
you,
you
Renae.
back.
And this is Off the Cuff, and I'll be your host for this show and for other shows. Hopefully, maybe we can do this once in a while. So on this show, I'll voice my opinion. We'll talk about some ghosts, some mythical creatures, cryptozoology. We'll talk about a little bit about everything. A little bit about everything. That's okay. I mean, there's nothing sacrosanct here. We'll talk about everything.
So whether you're psychic, whether you're downloading information through technical remote viewing, whether you're having a dream about something, it is information. It's energy, basically, information, and it is translated into the information.
Okay, now
time doesn't matter, right? So I think once we get out of the three dimensions, you start getting to the time dimensions, get into these things. How does that tachyon field relate to time?
Right, there is no time. There's never been any time. Einstein, he was lazy. He was a lazy kid. He was a lazy ass child. Okay, Loreto, Peru, which is in Alto Nani, which is a district of Lima. Okay, there is a small village there, which you pointed out on the map, and that they was buzzed by a white orbic UFO about 3 days ago. And they buzzed that city. And then it landed over into the jungle. Now, let me just back up. Every 10 years or so, this will happen. One time it was in Colombia, another time it was in Brazil, and they actually made a movie about it called The Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mm-hmm. Okay, it was sci-fi, but it was actually based on real events. And this is one of those real events. Now, you're